We continue now at the top of Daf Kufyud Beis Amud Aleph Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 112a. The Gemara here continues Mivzaz Buzzes Mina. Again, when you're talking about a situation of Yibam, so there already it's possible that a person can be in seclusion with the Yevama for 30 days, even according to Rabbi Yossi, because this is really the wife of his brother. It's not really his wife, and therefore he's embarrassed from her. He's not as comfortable with her. Rashi says Mivzaz buzzes Boshem, and he's embarrassed from her, and therefore even Rabbi Yossi might agree that a person can be in seclusion with her even up to 30 days, and we can say that there was no active relations until that point. And the Gemara continues and asks, why are we forcing this individual to do chalitza, talking about a case again where the man has not actually consummated the marriage with the woman, the active relations for the Yibam has actually not happened, so it said that we force him to do chalitza. Why do we force him to do chalitza? Why don't we instead, we should force him to do Yibam. We should force him to consummate the marriage. And so the Gemara says, Rav says, we're talking in the Mishnah specifically about a case where she actually already received a get from him, and she is claiming there was no consummation of the marriage, they never had an act of relations, and therefore the get is not sufficient. Therefore she's claiming she needs chalitza, and that's why we force the chalitza. Rashi over here says, B'shagita yotze shanasan lo get, he gave her a get. So again, we thought that this was a get that was for the act of relations, but there wasn't one, and that's why she's asking that there should be a chalitza. And the Gemara continues, Meisve, we have the following question from a Brisa on Rav. Again, Rav is assuming that in our case she's holding a get, and that's why we're not forcing Yibam, instead we're forcing Chalitza. So the Brisa says, Yevam Amra Besoch Shloshim Yom. Let's say the Yevama says, within 30 days, Lo Nevalti. She says, we didn't have any relations. Bein Shu Amar Baalti, Bein Shu Amar Lo Baalti. Whether he says there was an act of relations, or whether he says there was no act of relations. Kofin Ososha Yachlotz Los. So we're going to force him. He has to do Chalitza. Now, if this happens after 30 days, so we ask him to do chalitza, but we don't force it. He omeres nevalti. Now, let's say she's the one that says there was an act of relations. V'hu omer lo balti, and he says there was no act of relations. So, in such a situation, hareze yotzi beget. In such a situation, she can go out with a get. Again, he'll give her a get in order to divorce her. Hu omer ba'alti. Now, if he says that that there was an act of relations, v'hi omeres lo nevalti, and she says there was no act of relations, ava b'shechazer v'yamar lo ba'alti. Now, even though he went and said no, actually there was no act of relations, he then goes and agrees with her. So still tzarich get v'chalitza. Still get and chalitza is going to be required. And Rashi over here says, Hi omeres nevalti la'achar shloshim kai. Again, we're talking here that she says that there was an act of relations after 30 days. So the halacha is yotzi beget. So the halacha is that he divorces her with a get. In bala hotzia dayo beget. It means to say it's enough with a get. Tehina menes, she's actually believed in that case, meaning to say that she is believed there was an act of relations. To kuli hailo mukam, because it's already been after 30 days. So if it's after 30 days and she's saying that nevalti there was an act of relations, we believe that. Tzricha get, and so then it said that she requires a get libiyaso mishum da'amar ba'alti. Let's say he said that there was an act of relations, so then you're going to require a get for that act of relations. Ulachar shloshim yom iu mehemen, and again after 30 days he is believed, meaning to say he's believed that there was an act of relations. Vechalitza, but also she's going to require chalitza. Why? Mishum disha visa lenafsha chaticha disura. Well, that's because she has made it that she's actually usher. Because in this case she's claiming there was no act of relations. He's saying there was an act of relations. So there she's actually made it that she herself is saying that she is prohibited, so she requires chalitza. Now the point to bring this brisa is get. Now from the fact that this brisa is talking about she needs a get, she doesn't need a get, that shows that we're talking about a case where she doesn't yet have a get. So therefore, so then we're back to our question, why does it say in the beginning that we force chalitza? Why not just force them to do yivam? Again, Rav's answer was Gita yotze mitachas yada, that she already has a get, but it's clear from this brisa that she does not already have a get. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yami says, Rabbi Yami answers, Tzricha chalitza im gita. No, the brisa doesn't mean to say that she needs a get. She already has a get. It means to say she requires the chalitza together with her get. And Rashi over here explains, Amar Rabbi Yami says, Liolam b'shagita biyada. Really the case is that she is holding the get in her hand, like Rav said. V'hachi kamer, here's how you understand the brisa, Tzricha chalitza im gita. She requires chalitza together with the get that she already has. Now Rashi points out, now even though this whole end of the brisa is going really on the case we don't force the chalitza. That's going on in the case where we request of him to do chalitza, because it's talking about after 30 days, where we generally assume that they had relations. But here's what it means. Even though he actually retracted and said that there was no act of relations, and therefore he's admitting to that. Therefore you might say we should force the chalitza, because he's admitting that there was no relations, just like she is claiming. So therefore, but still, nevertheless, we don't force it. Rather, she requires chalitza. But if he doesn't want to do it, we don't force it. Because we still do rely on what he said initially. Since it was after 30 days, we do assume that there was an act of relations like the man originally claimed. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Rav Ashi says, Hasam over there, meaning by the Mishnah, get l'zeikasa, the get that was already given was given for the bond. In other words, there was a zeka bond between them, and he gave a get. And hacha, but over here, when we're talking about the brisa, get l'biyasa, we're talking about the get that's given for the act of relations. And Rashi over here explains, Rav Ashi says, Liolam tzricha get acher levad get harishon. Really, she does require another get besides for the first get. Why? Tahazam get lezeikasa, because over there in the Mishnah, we're talking about a situation where he gave her a get for the zeka, for the bond that existed between them. V'nifsala alav. Now that get actually makes her disqualified to him, and the act of relations is now prohibited. And therefore, lefigach, therefore lo nachfina liyavim. That's why the Mishnah says we don't force yibum. Rather, what we do, again, the situation is over there where she's claiming there was no act of relations, and it's within 30 days. So what we do is we force a chalitza. V'kevan damar ba'alti. But now, taking a look at our case over here in this brisa that was just brought, if he now says, I did have an act of relations, so therefore, tzricha get lebeyasa, there's going to be another get that's required for the act of bia, the yesh bia achar get, because the bia does have halachic ramifications even after a get was given. And according to this, the afal pi that is in the brisa makes sense. That's talking about over here where it says, afal pi shechazer v'yamar lo ba'alti, even though he retracts and he says there was no act of relations. Here's what it means. Afal pi shechazer v'yamar lo ba'alti, even though he went ahead and said that he actually did not have an act of relations. V'ikol v'yamar lo tiboy get ele chalitza. Maybe you would say the only requirement is chalitza, not a get. Afilu hachi boy get. Nevertheless, this get is required. Again, that's talking about the get that is required for the act of bia. The Gemara continues, Hanu shnehem modim dasu l'kamei d'Rava. There was a situation where both of them admitted that there was no act of relations, and they came before Rava. Amar lu Rava, Rava said to them, Chalotzu lo shola tigra. You should just do chalitza, and then everything will be fine. Amar le Rav Sharvia l'Rava, so Rav Sharvia said to Rava v'atanya, but didn't we learn in the brisa above, tzricha get v'chalitza, that not only is chalitza required, but get is also required. She needs both get and chalitza. Amar le, so he said back to me, Tanya, if you have a brisa that says that, then we will follow that brisa. Rashi over here explains, Shneim modim shelo nivala umeikara amar ba'alti. The case is they both admit at this point that there was no act of relations, but originally he said ba'alti. Originally he said that there was an act of relations, and so that's why we're quoting the brisa to say that chalitza is not going to be sufficient. A get is going to be required as well. And the Gemara continues, Boy mine Hon bereder of Nachman mider of Nachman. Hon, the son of Rav Nachman, asked Rav Nachman the following question: Tzarasa Mahu, what would be the halacha in terms of her co-wife? Rashi over here says Tzarasa Mahu, meaning Yevama shekonsa Yavam. Let's say you have a situation of a Yevama, and there is Yibam. The Yavam does Yibam with the Yevama. V'niftarat Tzarasa, and so therefore really the co-wife should be exempt. She should be pater. V'yamra Yevama la'achar zman, but then the Yevama says a little later, Lo nevalti, we never had an act of relations. So Ma'u le'yasar Tzarasa mimnei dibura shalzu. Do we say that statement of hers actually now comes along and prohibits her co-wife? Amar le, so he said back to him, Rav Nachman responded, V'chim imneshan ukofin umevakshin tayasar tzara. Just because we're forcing chalitza or we're requesting chalitza, is that a reason to forbid? Is that a reason to create a prohibition for the co-wife? In other words, this is dealing with her. We have a certain amount of uncertainty regarding her, but that does not affect the co-wife. Rashi over here says, that's her because she made herself prohibited by saying there was no act of relations. Nesra tzaras, is that a reason why we should prohibit the tzara? For sure the tzara is fine, because in general there is a chazaka, there's a presumption that there was relations. But if she says there was no relations, she creates problems for herself. And so then that's why we're requiring or forcing the chalitza or asking for the chalitza. But again, that does not affect the tzara. The Gemara Gemara continues that the Mishnah Hanoderes Hanav V'chulu, again talking about a situation where she took an oath not to get benefit from the Yavam. And the Gemara says, Tanan Hasam, we learned in the Mishnah over there, Barishona Hayu Omrim Shalosh Nashim Yotzos V'Notlos Ksuba. Originally they said that there are 3 cases of women who they're divorced from their husbands, but they still get the ksuba. In other words, they can force their husbands to divorce them, but they still receive their ksuba money. And the cases are as follows: Ha'omeres Tamea Aniloch. One case is, let's say she says, I'm defiled to you. That's talking about the wife of a Kohen. If she says she was raped, she becomes prohibited to her husband. He has to divorce her, but still, he still gives her the ksuba. Hashamayim Bein Leveinech, let's say that she says that it's known by Shamayim, it's known in the heavens that really you are not acting with me in the normal way that a husband acts with his wife, meaning to say in terms of the normal acts of relations, and therefore for that reason she wants to leave him. Again, we force him to divorce her, and she still gets her ksuba. And Netula Ani Min HaYehudim, let's say she takes an oath, she takes a neder, and she says, I'm not going to have relations with any Jewish people. So there, in that situation as well, let's say for example, it's painful for her to have the act of relations, whatever the case may be. So in those cases also, we're going to force the husband to divorce her, she still gets the ksuba. But then they changed their minds, Chazru Lomar, but then they retracted and they said, that they didn't want, that this would encourage women, that maybe she saw somebody else, another man that she wants to marry, and therefore she'll ruin herself for her husband. We don't want to encourage that. So therefore they changed these rulings and they said as follows. Ella rather, let's say she says she's the wife of a Kohen, she says, I've been defiled, and I can no longer be with you. So Tavi Raya, she has to bring a proof to what she's saying. She has to bring a proof that she's Tameya. Hashamayim Beini Leveinecho, let's say she says the heavens know what's going on between me and you. So Yasu Derech Bakasha. So over there we don't force him to divorce her, but we request that he divorces her. And finally, Netula Ani Min HaYehudim, let's say she made an oath that she's saying she's going to refrain from all Jewish people. She won't have relations with any Jews. So the halacha is Yafer Chalko, very simple. He simply annuls, he's able to annul her vow in terms of his portion, meaning annul the part of the vow that prohibits him to be with her, Umesham Shaso, and then she will be able to have relations with him, Utei Netula Min HaYehudim, but she will in fact be prohibited from all other Jewish people. And Rashi over here explains, Homeres Tme'ani Loch Eshes Kohen Shamar Labala Nenasti, again, the wife of a Kohen, she says, I was raped. The Itzarala, she's now prohibited to the husband, Chsubasa Lo Mifsada, she doesn't lose out on her ksuba in that case. Again, it happened against her will, and therefore she still gets her ksuba. Hashamayim Bini Levenecha Goliv Yodua Lefanav, She'enach Nizkak Likederech B'nei Adam Ve'enisha Eid Lochiach Ben Shnenu. There's no witnesses to it, I can't prove it, but it's between me and you. But you know, it's well known that you're not acting with me in the normal fashion that a husband acts with his wife. And Netula Ani Min HaYehudim, no Ishalo Tibal Yehudim, again, she takes an oath that she's not going to have relations with Jewish people. And Midasra Nafsha Kuli Alma, the fact that she prohibited herself on everybody, Shmami no Tashmish Kasha Lav Anusi, you see, it must be a situation where Tashmish is difficult for her, and therefore Lefikach Natelas Ksuba, so therefore she gets her Ksuba. But then the Gemara says, no, they changed their mind. No, maybe she's really thinking, I'll go somewhere where nobody recognizes me, and I'm going to marry this other person. So Tavi Raya, she has to prove that she was raped by the wife of a Kohen, Vimlav Lo Kal Kamina, the Asra Nafshala, otherwise we don't believe her, to make herself prohibited. Yasu Derech Bakasha Lebalis Nagva Min Agyafa. We ask him to do a divorce, we don't force it. And so again, that's what they changed their minds, that's how they retracted those rulings. And the Gemara continues, the following question. What would be a case where the woman says that she doesn't want to have relations with any Jewish people? What would be the halacha in terms of how she is with the Yavam, in terms of the situation of Yibam with a brother-in-law? Did it occur to her that her husband would die, and that she might end up falling to the brother-in-law? Olo or not, do we say that's not the same? Rav says, Yavam eno kibal. Rav says we do not treat the Yavam, we don't treat the brother-in-law like the husband. Shmuel Amar Yavam hareu kibal. But Shmuel says no, the Yavam is treated in the same fashion as the husband. Rashi over here says, she made this oath during the life of her husband. Does she become prohibited to the Yavam, to the brother-in-law? Maybe her neder was thinking of the brother-in-law, because really it was possible she thought of this idea that she might fall to Yibam. hafer el lechelko, and therefore the husband only annulled his portion. V'yavam nami lo motzi mefer shafelu balein mefer bekodmin v'asuralo. Now the yavam can't annul any vows, because even a husband can't annul vows that took place before the marriage, and so therefore that means this would be a problem. Olo or not, aska daita, she never thought of this possibility. V'lo nadrazu el lesser atzmal kol mishum muteres lo al yedei gerushe bala. Therefore, what she was really thinking was, if she gets divorced, all of those people she wanted to make herself forbidden to. She was really just doing this so the husband should not suspect that she's just trying to leave her, to leave him for someone else. Was a way of convincing him to divorce. But when it comes to a brother-in-law, who aside from a situation of a mitzvah of yivam, she's prohibited him anyway, even after divorce, she never had that intention. She's mutter to him, and if her husband dies, and there is no divorce. So again, we have a machlokas amoraim. One opinion is eino kabal. He's not like the husband. She yetzarech lohafer kabal, meaning that he would have needed to do it to annul like the husband. The adaita debal notra, because she had in mind she was doing it for the husband. But tzarech lohafer, and he, meaning the husband, is the one that needs to annul the vow. Aval yavam muteris below hafara. The idea of saying eino kabal is that she's actually mutter to the yavam, and there's no need for hafara. That's what it means. Eino kabal. He's not like the husband. There's no requirement of hafara, and therefore she's mutter even without hafara. That's Rav's opinion, eino kabal. Shmuel says no, the yavam is like the baal, meaning to say the yavam is like the baal, and annulment is required, which of course he can't do, and therefore there would be a prohibition. And the Gemara says, Amar Abaya, Abaya says, Kivase de Rav mistabra. It makes sense to say like Rav that the brother-in-law is not like the husband, and therefore when it comes to the brother-in-law, we're going to say that there's no prohibition whatsoever. The Tanan, as we learned in our Mishnah, Hanoderes Hanam Yevama B'chaye Bala, it says, let's say she takes an oath not to get benefit from her brother-in-law while her husband is alive. Kofano Soshi Achlotz, in that case, we force him to do Chalitza. And so the Gemara says, Vim Isa Damaska Daita. Now, if it were true that she thought of this possibility, meaning that she actually did think of the possibility that Yibum would occur, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Yud Beis Amud Beis.